David Kleeman. 4 spooky myths about
Great, a sachet in peach and Guantanamo Bay. Just the intro I was hoping for. You know, really there's nothing spooky about the myths that I'm going to talk about kids in virtual reality. It's just that it was Halloween and I thought that would make it, and the image was so good I couldn't resist. But here's what I'm going to talk about today. 4 myths about virtual reality that I think are not true and are changing fast, even if they were true at one point. It's not for kids, it's expensive, it's a long way away, and it's a gimmick. And then at the end, especially because I think we've got some discussion time scheduled after, I want to close with some of the things that I think are the big questions about virtual reality. You know, it is right now at a stage where it could be a tipping point for it, where I think the next couple of years are going to be really seminal for it. But if we don't develop the content for it, and the ideas for it that are kid-friendly, that are kid-sensitive, and that really add something that kids can't do otherwise, then really it's just going to be another gimmick. So I want to close with those questions to spark some of the discussion after we're done. I think Chris Byrne actually laid a really nice groundwork for this yesterday. He talked about kids exploring the world, having new experiences, and discovering themselves. And I think those are the 3 things that we're going to be looking at that are the great potential for virtual reality. Let's start with the idea that it's not for kids. I think we have an amazing opportunity with virtual reality. With almost every technology in the last, say, 60 years or 70 years at least, kids have been the way that they sell the device into the home. This is, you know, they with television, they said, oh, you got to get television. It's going to be so great for your kids. There's going to be so much content for kids. Color television came along. Oh, you got to get color. Kids are going to learn so much by being able to see the world in color. Internet, you know, cable TV, all channels and channels of educational programming for kids. Internet, tablets, all of that gets sold in, and as soon as there's market penetration, it's kids. We'll do something for kids. You sort of lose that focus. With virtual reality, we have been hands-off on kids for a while, and for good reasons. People have not been developing for kids, in part because we were worried about how developmentally were they ready for it. Developmentally, could they handle the effects of virtual reality? There are still concerns, and there's still a lot we don't know about how they'll react to it. And even to things like designing virtual reality gear that is appropriate for kids, even something as simple as the interpupillary distance, making sure that we've designed VR gear that is adjustable to the size of kids' heads. But that fact that we've held off for a while, that we haven't developed for kids first and made promises about it, gives us the chance to really step back and think about what's going to be, how it's going to be right for kids. My company, Dubit, actually did some research with kids in our lab in Leeds, bringing them in and letting them try out the Oculus, just to see how they reacted to it. Did they feel queasy? Did they feel uncomfortable? Could they understand how to make it work easily? And we found that actually they loved it. They were really taken with it. They could play with it for a good, reasonable amount of time, but also recognized that they didn't want to play with it for too long. That it would. One of the things that they found that was a problem, for example, was that the headset was slightly heavy for them. It got uncomfortable after a while. But at the same time, new devices are actually getting lighter and lighter, and so that's going to solve that problem. Cardboard, which I'll talk about more extensively later, is a huge step there.
Sorry, David, did they get queasy?
They did not get queasy. Not in our test.
Was it the 2? Was it the second session?
The second.
Oculus 2?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing about cardboard is one of the things that's slowed us down has been this idea of parents seeing their kids strapped into something like an Oculus Rift. It's a really sort of disconcerting thing. Even if the kid is having fun, it just looks wrong to see your kid in headphones and this, what Warren was describing as being used for torture purposes as well. Cardboard, again, is going to make a huge difference there. Just a couple of the little things we found, and again, don't worry about the numbers. It's too small to really see it well. But you can see that this is 10-year-old boys. This is a chart of their enjoyment and their comfort when they were using the controller. Some of them actually said it was easier for them to manipulate or to control the game than a typical game controller. They had some trouble with some of the things that required really precise movements, but by and large, they really felt it was easy to use. But you can see in that chart both comfort and enjoyment that it goes up and down, that they hit frustration points, points where the game would change. They would either go to a new game or they would go to a new level of a game, and they would find that they would have to kind of reset and figure out again how to do it. So that goes up and down. What did they like and what did they dislike? They said, these were the words that they used, epic, cool, weird, but they said they loved being able to explore and to look around and to go wherever, essentially wherever they wanted. In some ways, we were hearing the same kinds of things you hear from kids about Minecraft, that it's a world that they could explore on their own. It was not just games, but how immersed they felt in the game, how engaged they were in the play, very much what we were hearing about this morning. And the fascinating thing to us is they were the ones who generated ideas for educational uses of it. We asked, what would you love to do with this? Now that, if this was on the market, if you were able to play with this, what kinds of things would you love to see? They went straight for the educational. They wanted to do things like explore, someone mentioned it this morning, explore inside galaxies, explore inside atoms. They wanted to do dissections or to do explorations of the human body inside it. What did they dislike? I mentioned the weight. They felt the graphics weren't especially clear compared to what they were used to on their other games, and the cost, and we'll get to the cost in just a minute. In fact, we'll get to the cost now. Oculus is coming down in price when it gets to the market, but beyond that, you need a fairly expensive computer still to make it run. So it's not going to be inexpensive. It's not right away going to be something that families are going to want to have in their homes. But cardboard is the game changer, I think. This is a shot from Australia of a cereal company that turned its boxes into cardboard VR viewers. So with every box of cereal, you got a functional VR viewer. And on the bottom, there was a QR code so that you could order up, so that you could download software to make it work. So what are we talking about? $2 to $3 for a box of cereal, and you get for the cardboard, and you get the cereal.
Kellogg's did it, right? Kellogg's did it?
Kellogg's?
Yeah, did that campaign.
Yep, in Australia.
That's a brand cereal.
We've been passing around. Robin just said that what's being passed around now is very much like the ViewMaster that's coming out. ViewMaster, $30 for the basic plastic ViewMaster and the first disc, and then an additional 3 discs. This is straight off the Amazon website. $45 gets you the viewer and 4 discs. Ubiquity. If you look at the fast spread of smartphones, and they're now saying that 1/3 of the planet will have smartphones by 2018. PC sales dropping, mobile game revenues rising while console game revenues are dropping. It's all leading toward the focus on these small devices, and that's exactly where cardboard wants you to be. Another way of looking at that is the growth of the smartphone market. People are increasingly focused on the smartphone. And then speed. You need a certain level of speed of processor inside the smartphone in order to be able to make the VR work effectively. The iPhone 6S that just came out fairly recently, 50% faster than the iPhone 6, and the 6 was 50 times faster than the original iPhone. So we're getting to the point where almost every phone that people are going to have within a couple of years will be at a processor speed that will be able to handle virtual reality. It's a long way away, myth number 3. It's not. It's here right now. Have people here seen the expeditions, the Google's expeditions video? I don't want to spend time on the videos if people have seen them, but if not, it's worth taking a look.
Anywhere in the world that you want to go, where would you want to go?
I would like to go to the moon, Thailand, ancient Greece,
India to Nigeria, my homeland.
one or maybe all of the 7 wonders of the world. When you explore different places, you have the chance to actually learn something new.
You want to be able to show the kids that there's something outside of your community that you can go to and learn from, and that there's other places you can visit.
All right, so let's do our objective and we'll talk about the lesson for today.
We're going to take a field trip to Verona, Italy, to see the place where Romeo and Juliet lived.
I'm going to take you on this field trip under the water. Okay, you guys ready? Pick up your devices.
And look in your cardboard.
What is that? I see a shark.
It allowed us to go somewhere we wouldn't normally be able to go.
Are we in China?
This is the Great Wall of China.
We got to see the place itself so we could actually understand what she was talking about.
How long would it take to walk the length of the Great Wall of China? How much more enriching than just showing them a picture or just having them read about it?
This device can actually make us go to places that we've never been before.
It brings the lesson to you.
You have to see it for yourself to believe it.
There's so much other places to see, so you know that it's never going to end.
I think there are a couple things in this video that sparked me. One is the idea that the price is getting down far enough that you can have an entire classroom of kids who each have their own cardboard, as opposed to trying to pass one device around or take turns with it. But even more important for me is the way that it was used in this video. The idea that the VR is not the end point, but it is the spark for something further. It's figuring out how long it would take you to walk the Great Wall of China after you've had a chance to see it. It's going somewhere and then discussing the learning around it, not just that you immerse kids in the experience and then say, well, wasn't that nice? At play as well as in school, I think that the next year or so is going to be a watershed for it. And here I want to talk less about VR and more about augmented reality. If you haven't seen the augmented reality for the video for the Pokemon Go, let me just show that to you very quickly.
Oops. There it is.
And then one more to show you. This is the video from a trade show demonstration of the Microsoft HoloLens.
You know the cool things about HoloLens is that it lets you display Minecraft virtually anywhere. You can get different perspectives on your Minecraft world. It's awesome to play with the controller, but could we show them something new, Sax?
Sure. Just take an experience off the wall and then put it on the table over here. Create world.
Manipulate the world using his voice and his hands. He can walk around the hologram, pan around for different viewpoints, and even look inside.
I'll talk in a little bit about the implications of some of that for why I think this is not just a gimmick, not just another toy to play with, but something that can be very powerful for kids. I mentioned before the growing presence of smartphones. Smartphones are dropping in price. They're now talking about ones that will be under $100 that are designed specifically with features that will be intended for the developing world. They're now projecting 1 billion people in the next couple of years, added to the people around the world who have smartphones. The idea of this becoming a more equitable distribution of technology and using virtual reality to connect people around the world, to let them share experiences I think once we get to that kind of ubiquity is very powerful. So is it a gimmick? We had, a couple of years ago at the Consumer Electronics Show, everyone was talking about 3D television. 3D just never really caught on, in part because there was nothing particularly exciting about it. Things came out at you, or you sort of went in a little bit into things. But by and large, it wasn't about how people watched television. It wasn't about what they wanted when they were sitting in their living room. By contrast, you think about the transition from the BlackBerry to the iPhone, and all that allowed you to do that ensured that it was not going to be a gimmick, that it was going to be a change in the game. So what about virtual reality is different? This is a wonderful quote from a guy who I work with on the Television Academy Board. Seth Shapiro is one of the governors for the Interactive Peer Group. And he talks about virtual reality as a canvas of space in the way that video is a canvas of time. So this is going to be a complete change in the way that we can tell stories, and it's going to require a rethinking by writers and by directors of just how we want to tell stories. But this idea that we can explore space in the same way that we've explored sort of more linear time lately, I think is one reason it's going to take off. This is one of my favorite reasons, though. The idea, a lot of the research that's been going on around virtual reality so far has been about what kinds of human experiences you can give people by putting them in the capacity to understand how other people live. So the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab, where you have the chance to be immersed in a refugee camp and to understand what day-to-day life is really like. It's one thing to read about it in the New York Times, to see it on television and on the television news. It's another thing to be standing in the middle of it and get a sense of the scope and the desperation and the sort of feeling of it. And then at the University of London, a study that they were doing on self-resemblance, where you would actually wear the virtual reality and you would see yourself as someone else in the mirror, so that you would see yourself as a black person if you were white, or just a transformation, and you would start to understand how it feels to be seen in a different way. A lot of research going on around kids and autism, and whether you can let them rehearse things that they will experience in the real world, in a virtual world, so that when they encounter them in the real world, they've got practice in how to respond to them. This I thought was a fascinating thing. I mentioned before that writers and directors are going to have to rethink it. This is someone who's talking about how if you try to create an exciting or interesting experience in this, that it's not going to work, that what you have to do is create an experience that's immersive first, and the excitement will come from being able to explore that world. That if you use it the way that we've used 3D, of something's going to come flying at you, that's not going to be the way people are going to want to use virtual reality. And this is from the creator of the Oculus, or the creative director at the Oculus Story Studios. Again, something for you to think about as creators. That in virtual reality, a story is about you. You are literally at the center of the story. I work with a lot of producers of children's television who talk about creating TV stories where kids are at the center, where you are telling a very child-centered story. Some of you have seen the screenings I've done in the past of just simple things like kids. There's the one that I've shown often of the little Dutch-Japanese girl who makes sushi with a very big knife. There are stories just of kids at play that are very, very child-centered stories. They're shot at the level of the child. The narrative style is supposed to echo that a child would use. In virtual reality, it's an entirely different thing. The user, the audience, is at the center of the story. So we're going to have to learn a whole new, essentially, language of filmmaking in order to create virtual reality for kids. One of the really big things for me is kids, especially with augmented reality, kids as producers, not consumers of media. We talked a little bit yesterday about some of the new drawing apps that allow you both to color and animate and then bring to life the characters that you draw. I'm also thinking from MIT, the Tailblazer app that allows you to create games that sit somewhere. that sit in a particular place. I love the idea of kids being able to tag their world, of kids being able to essentially talk about what's important to them and place it in space where it's important to them, to tell a story about something that happened to them in a particular place and have it there for other kids to discover. Or to tell what they love about the city where they live and have kids who come to visit that city be able to access that information and find out what they should be looking for in a new place. So I'm going to close with some of the big questions because I think we're going into a discussion period pretty soon. We've got a lot of wine and beer tonight, so these are good wine and beer kinds of questions. At the moment, the content for virtual reality is I haven't seen a lot that I would want to come back to over and over. So what's going to be sticky in VR? What's going to be deep? What is it that's going to make people not want to just play something once and then say, well, that was a great experience. I rode the roller coaster. I felt the feeling of it swaying as I was doing this, but okay, I've done that. Now what? So what are we going to create that is really going to have lasting value for kids and is going to bring them back over and over? What's going to be social in virtual reality? We're not far from the capacity to really link people through this technology. There are certainly experiments out there. We saw some at CityKid that are some more adult than others, shall we say. But for young people, what's going to be social? How are we going to connect kids? That sense of Ubuntu that I was talking about before, I am because you are. How are we going to make kids feel what it's like to be in someone else's shoes? Do kids care about that kind of immersion? How do we help them care about it? What kinds of experiences do we create that are truly immersive? And is it going to be more about experiences, or is it going to be more about gaming in the long run? In terms of distribution of VR, are we going to end up with one device? Are we all going to have just the one device at home that we share as a family, or are we going to have ones that we carry around? Is our next phone going to come with a VR view that we carry around with us to use with the phone, but at home we've got a fancier gear setup, like the equivalent of console versus mobile gaming. How robust is the market for VR hardware going to be? Is there going to be one company that's going to take it over, or are we going to have a whole range of different VR hardware that's going to give us choice in that regard? And finally, are people going to pay for it? What is a parent willing to invest either in the device or in the software to go along with it to give their kids a virtual reality experiences? Are we going to create an unsustainable market the way we have in a lot of things where kids' content is very hard to afford to create and distribute? Where if you really want to do high quality, it becomes too expensive to produce. What will the financial model be for it? So those are some questions to leave you with, and I want to leave you with just one more reminder. This comes from that it's not all about virtual reality. This comes from the late 90s from Nickelodeon.
First, there were video games. Then came virtual reality. Simulated lifelike perspective that makes you feel like you're there. But now there's something that blows virtual reality completely away. Actual reality. Feel the weight of the ball because you're actually holding the ball. Feel the wind as you move because you're actually outside. Feel the high five because you're actually there. Nickelodeon wants you to tune into the most advanced system ever created. Yourself. Actual reality. Nothing else comes close.